Okay, good afternoon in Europe. I'm Paul Brotherton of Wetlands International Europe, a member of the Horizon SpongeBoost Consortium. I'm here to welcome you and thank you for joining us on this summer day for our first SpongeBoost webinar, Turning Evidence into Action for Sponge Landscapes. I will be moderating and guiding us through the agenda. And first of all, I believe we are going to record the webinar for people who are not able to join at this time. So we hope you are okay with that. Next, just the general house rules. Please keep your microphone off unless speaking so we don't have background noise. And I believe the video is up to you. But nice to see you if you're asking a question. And here on the screen is our program for today as we explore this question: how do we turn evidence into action for sponge landscapes? Today, we will look at 4 different pieces of that puzzle in our agenda. First, the project itself and why sponge landscapes matter. Second, how we're making evidence accessible through the sponge database. Third, how we communicate these ideas beyond the usual technical audiences. And finally, how can they inform policy and implementation? So we will encourage your questions. If you have a question, please write it in the chat during the presentations. We'll be checking to see if we have any questions, and if we have time after each presentation, we can take a question or two. And you'll note that we've reserved time at the end of the webinar after the presentations for a broader discussion on the content or other topics within the webinar. So that's enough from me. I will stop sharing and let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Matthias Schultz from the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research, UFZ, who leads the SpongeBoost project. Matthias.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. And I just will give you a short summary about the SpongeBoost project, and therefore I will share now my screen. Yes, and it's a pleasure to show you some of our results. Now we already are working more than 2 years on this really exciting topic, retaining water in the landscape. And it's actually it's one of the topics in environmental science and planning, which is more and more important, especially when we just have escaped one of the last heat waves here in Central Europe. And that it is really important to keep water in the landscape, not only to protect us for extreme floods, that also that landscape, the natural system can store the water as much as possible as a sponge. And here we are working in this project with several partners, and especially we are working also on sites and natural sponges, like here in Spain in the Sistral Mountains, where we have one of these natural sponges, which is when it is functioning, where we're working as a sponge. So SpongeBoost is addressing actually a spatial expert database on SpongeBoost projects, where you will get some insights later on by my colleague Jos. And what we are doing in the sites is we want to monitor a little bit better the long-term effects of past projects. And on a global overview, you will get it seen on the database later on, but in the evidence from the sites will be projected and reported on other webinars later on. What we are also doing is to evaluate the success, but also the failures. The failures is much more important because we have to learn from it, but very often it's not reported. And what we also already have done is a catalog of best practice approaches and innovative solutions, which is behind the database we are presenting later on. And here, these are our sites where we are doing monitoring across Europe. We have peatlands and we have floodplains. They are all somehow disturbed. We have a very good case study site on the Azore Islands in the on the Gamine Plateau. There are peatlands due to the high rate of rain there, but we also have peatlands in the Sistral Mountains in Galicia. And we have peatlands in the Eifel, in the bordering mountain area between Belgium and Germany, and in Estonia, which are providing the largest peatlands of Europe. And we are working in floodplains along the Ebro, in an urban floodplain in Leipzig, but also in Estonia. So we try to show evidence how sponge is working when we are restoring and showing the benefits. What does it mean for the people and nature? But we also are part of a larger family. We have sister projects. So, they are called SpongeScapes and SpongeWorks. And here on the map, you can see how they are distributed across Europe. And they are showing really that we have covered a really wide gradient from east to west, but also from south to north, and covering several geographic regions, but also different regions due to rainfall. So, and now, I'm looking forward to get some more insights about some of our outcomes of the SpongeBoost project, and we will see something about our Sponge database, about the comic books, which is very important for outreach activities. But we also want to guide a little bit the policymakers and the stakeholders, and we have a new policy brief and in the end interactive discussion.
Thank you very much, Matthias. I think you've set the scene very nicely, showing us we have this growing body of knowledge about sponge landscapes and their benefits, but evidence only has value if people can actually find and use it. So that brings us to our next presentation. One of SpongeBoost's key outputs has been developing the sponge database, bringing together knowledge, examples, and resources into one place. So now I'd like to invite Jos de Bijl of Bureau Strobing to introduce us to Sponge.
Yes, thank you everyone, and thank you, Paul. Thank you everyone for being in this webinar. I will share my presentation. Well, we had a task to build a Sponge database, Sponge solutions database, and there are many already in Europe. So we slightly twisted our task, and it was to bring together all the knowledge that is already in existing European databases. So this is let's say a top database, which is the portal to all the other databases that we have right now. So the Sponge database is one place for pan-European sponge knowledge. It's actually integrating projects from existing databases, as I was telling. And it makes nature-based sponge solutions easier to explore by supporting the exchange of experiences and knowledge across Europe. And Sponge is the Sponge Project Online Navigation Guide Europe. Well, first of all, why do we need another Sponge database? I mean, there are already many. Well, what we see and what we're experiencing in Europe today as well is, of course, climate change increases the water-related challenges. Droughts, wildfires, floodings, etc. They are topping over one another. Many solutions already exist, but knowledge is scattered around Europe, and finding relevant examples is time-consuming and not that easy. Well, there is a need for inspiration, evidence, and collaboration, and we need, in Europe, we are good at shared learning, and we would like to enhance that with our database. Inside this database are already 15 databases that you are seeing in the slide here. They are included already 15 European databases, and some already also worldwide databases, WOCAT. The projects that are in those databases are screened and listed if they are suitable enough for the Sponge database. So not every project in the WOCAT database you can find in the Sponge database. It has to be related to retention of water. And so every database that you see here, we screened all the projects and we listed them in this European Sponge database. Important to highlight that it's not finished yet. We will include more national, especially national databases. So by the end of the project, this number will be increased. So what is inside the database? Inside there are already 1,000 projects, more or less, on enhancing water retention measures and nature-based solutions. They are categorized and organized by landscape settings / land use, so you can search for that as well. And they are organized by country, but also by type of MPS that you can include. It's an interactive map, so you can zoom in, you can zoom out, and you can select those projects that are most suitable for your case. Well, here you see again the landscape settings / land use that you can see with the different colors. They are highlighted with different colors. And all the measures, we defined 17 measures at the moment that we found in all those projects. And they are listed here, and you can select if you want to search for some issue, some solution, some measure, then you can select them. As you can see in the project scale, we highlighted by the size of the bullet. If you have a local project, a regional project, a national project, or even a cross-border project. That's also important because we find some measures are really defined by one field for several hectares. Some measures are included, some projects are included in a total river catchment. So it's important to have those the differentiation there. Well, how does it work? I'm not giving a real-time insight, but you can find out yourself by clicking on the link. We will send the link in the presentation as well. And there you see some fields that you can click on what I just said. You can click on any project or for summary and link to the original source. You can visualize projects by a landscape setting, a land use and project scale. And you can filter out the project that you would like to have more knowledge about. Important is also that there is a catalog of best practices approaches. So that's more a literature catalog that's also included. If you click on this bottom, you'll go to the most recent studies, technical studies, and the papers, universal papers that are listed here per country as well. You can also submit new projects. So you come for a list. We make sure that if someone submits a new project, that we check out first if everything is correct, and then put it again to the database. You get also some charts here. So some statistics are, if you make a selection, you see how many of the projects are selected in which country, and you can also choose yourself which charts you would like to see. If you zoom in on that database, you see here a screenshot of that. You will get into a map that has more detail as well. So you have a detailed map in which you see the river streams and the topographical situation at that point. That's also very handy if you want to submit a new project. So this is in general how it works. It's open for exploring and for feedback. very important. Oh yeah, you see some of the zoom-ins, not necessary to really go deep into that, but you can select, for instance, if you use no filters, you see all the different landscape settings that are there. You see in which country the most measures are being taken at the moment, as the database is as filled yet. But if you select, for instance, a filter like peatland, the chart will immediately select also only the projects that are related to peatlands. Well, you know, one example to highlight that this is just a portal, a portal of existing databases. If you click on one of the bullets, you find a short description that you see here on the top right, with what's the name of the project and a short description of the problems and measures being taken. And you see which is the model database that in this case it's SARE, and you can have a link in which you can click and you go to the model database and you find, for instance, in this case, this picture for this information. So you can find more information on the database that is actually the host of the project. Well, the next steps that we would like to take is the data quality control. So all the projects that are in there, are they listed very well? So we're organizing internal feedback, and we are trying to improve the quality of that. We aligning the functionality of different parts of the website. So it would be nice if it's better at the end of the project than it is now. Suggestions are very welcome. We have further extensions with national databases. The suggestions, if you know some databases that should be included, please let us know. And we will work on the increasing the findability of the database. Then eventually it will be a database with its own URL code. It's now linked to our company, but it will be a known database with a known URL code. And we work on promotion, like technical publications and so on. Well, how can the database support your work? It's a practical tool for practitioners, policymakers, model managers, and researchers. And it's designed to bring study and practical solutions, practical work together. So really combining those two, and it may enhance your work for inspiration or learning or from existing experiences, but also identifying relevant partners and support planning and decision makers. And mostly important, we are building, this is a tool to build on a shared European knowledge base. And I think that's the most important. This is one puzzle, one tool that we can use for that, to connect regions and communities and to connect learning together in Europe about the type of solutions and the type of problems that are being solved by the nature-based solution. So that's for now. We are very open for questions. Thank you very much. Also on behalf of my colleague Annelien Geurts. And I wish you a pleasant continuing from the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jos, for walking us through Sponge. If you have any questions already for Jos, you can drop those in the chat. And as you heard, there's an invitation to share additional databases and projects with us so we can include them in Sponge. I think the Sponge database is a great example of bringing knowledge together and making it more accessible. But as many of us have experienced, having the evidence available doesn't automatically mean people engage with it. So different audiences need different ways of understanding complex ideas. And that's where communication becomes just as important as science. And Carina Darmstadt of DUH is going to show us a rather different approach through SpongeBoost's comic series and the adventures of Spongy. Carina, please introduce us to Spongy.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. My name is Carina Darmstadt. I am an officer for Sponge Landscapes at Environmental Action Germany. And in our SpongeBoost project, I'm partly working on policy topics and in the communication package, where we are doing classical social media work. And we have, I'm seeing our SpongeBoost of the year today in here. We have a little award every year we're giving out. And then we have our innovative communication comic series. So I think you should be able to see my screen. We have published 2 parts of the comic books yet. Part 1, Floods, Facts and Wetlands, and Part 2, New Directions. The comic books are available in 9 languages, which is quite nice. We have English, German, Dutch, French, Portuguese, Bulgarian, Czech, Spanish, and Estonian. These are our consortium languages. And yeah, you are able to access our comics on our SpongeBoost website or on Zenodo. And we are planning to publish the last and final comic book in spring 2027. And we are currently working on our storyboard. Yeah, the idea is that we are translating complex topics like landscape water cycles and sponge functions in more accessible and engaging stories, so people can build emotions and connections through storytelling and perhaps identify with the characters in the comic books. And so we're trying to reach audiences which are not the traditional scientific and policy and academic bubbles. So we try to reach out and maybe connect to people who aren't aware of our sponge functions yet. And basically we try to inspire and support nature-based solutions. And this is not like a unique new idea we had in our consortium. As you can see on the right-hand side on the image, there is a platform which is called NBS Comics. They have a nice collection of nature-based solution comics, and we are trying to, we are adding up to those collections and are quite happy to have our little Spongy as a character guiding us through nature solutions. It's important to say I'm not the person who is drawing the comics. We have some support from Parzelle 34 from Weimar in Germany. They are illustrating our ideas because I can't draw. And together we were developing Spongy as a character. And in the beginning we were brainstorming how is our main superhero supposed to be. And then in our workshop we agreed on how we don't want to have like a muscle-bound classic superhero like Marvel. We don't want to have an animal which is representing the hero. We wanted to have somehow a gender-neutral character, and we wanted to have a character who comes out of the sponge landscapes and is somehow based in there. And then in the end, we agreed that we don't want to have a hero because we don't want to give the assumption that someone is coming and saving our world, because clearly it's us who is in charge of saving our planet. So we wanted a character who's more an enabler and motivator for people. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we had like the left wing as inspiration and Bergmold. Actually, I don't know the English translation for it. I'm sorry. Maybe someone can post it in the chat. And then we had different ideas how the character could be looking, and developed Spongy, our character, you can see on the bottom right-hand part. It was quite a process, but in the end, we had 4 key illustrations, which are presenting Spongy in different actions. You can see Spongy just neutral with its magic sponge, Spongy as a hands-on person, de-sealing a riverbed, Spongy as an advocate talking about responging Europe, and then just Spongy appreciating nature. The idea about the key illustrations is that we can support the project's visual identity in presentations, or especially in our social media work. So if you're following our channels, you might have seen a lot of these key illustrations in the past weeks. It's just showing the wide engagement of our project in different parts of society and issues. Like we have our practical implementation, we have our policy work, and everybody is connected by the love of nature. And then we started to develop the first storyline in 2024. So you can see the rough drawing of the storyboard. So just to give you an impression of the process. And in the end, after lots of rounds, we had our final comic one. And what's quite nice about the comics, it's not just a storyline. We have included different infographics, which is quite helpful to illustrate those complex things that are happening in the responging process and how nature is working. So over here, you can see one of the infographics of comic book 1, where we try to show how to slow down the water discharge in the landscape and like having more vegetation and letting the water seep into the ground and not running off on the surface. And then we were able to include like different multifunctional functions of the landscape into our little graphic over here. By the way, all of the comics are published with a CC license. So if you're interested, you can just download them and print them in your languages and distribute them and show the images in your different presentations and everything. Then another example of our infographics is this one, where we have like those 3 main measure sets, like let water into the landscape. Over there, we showed the dike relocation, keep the water in the landscape. There we showed how to reconnect the Oxbow and then stop the drainage. And then we had the closed drainage depicted down there, just to give like a really rough schematic idea of what our measures we can do. And then an example of comic book 2, where we showed the whole water course from the mountains to the delta and the sea. And then we showed different things over here you could do in different areas of the river. And the text boxes over here are somehow debunking some myth of, oh, it's expensive to do river restoration and stuff like this, which is quite nice to have all those information in one double page. It's always a bit tricky to include as much as possible. So like I can tell you it's a process, but we are really happy that it turned out that nicely. And we included some sponge cities. And then we had like a really nice vision image, which is quite nice to show people how could we have an inclusive, accessible, restored floodplain where people can enjoy their nature experience, and we still have the nature conservation part of it. And that's quite a strength of that visual tool, because we can show whatever we want. We can dream a little bit, and sometimes it's just easier to look on a picture and get all the impressions than listening to me for 10 minutes explaining you why sponge landscapes are important. And yeah, as I said, we are currently working on the issue 3 to actually finalize the storyline. So we have a set of 3 books. So we would be really happy if you follow our SpongeBoost social media channels, because you're going to get the information when comic book 3 is launched via our social media channels. And I think that's all I wanted to show you about our comics. For the storyline, you have to download them on our website and read for yourself what's happening in Spongy's adventures. And then I can just say thank you for listening to me. Paul.
Thanks a lot, Karina. I think Spongy is a great example that the evidence we have needs stories, images, and language that connects with different audiences. So ultimately, if sponge landscapes are going to be implemented at scale, they need to influence decisions. And our final presentation is going to look exactly at that, how the growing evidence base can support some timely EU policy opportunities and create better conditions for the implementation of sponge landscapes. For this, I want to introduce my colleague, Claire McCamphill of Wetlands International Europe. Claire.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and I'll hopefully share my screen. Okay, there we are. I got it. Okay, so yes, we've just published a policy brief titled Achieving Better Implementation of EU Policy by Restoring Sponge Function. So this is available on the Sponge website now. So we had a bit of an introduction about why we are restoring sponge function. This is the degraded soils and intensively drained catchments and the loss of wetlands means there has been this loss of sponge function throughout Europe. And with it, it's the loss of both water and climate resilience. And by restoring sponge function, which is what the 3 sponge projects are aiming to deliver advances on, we can retain more water in the land, in soils where it's needed, particularly for agriculture, and in groundwater systems. And we see this as a systemic, like, no regret strategy for actually building societal resilience, and also importantly for underpinning competitiveness for the European economy. And we see sponge function as this holistic approach to thinking about how can we limit floods, increase water availability, and also improve water quality, and at the same time enhance biodiversity. So we think sponges, like Spongy, are the superheroes, and the policy brief was aiming at, okay, how do we try and integrate this concept into the existing policies that there are, and especially looking at the short term, what are the key planning, what are the key policies and key planning instruments to engage with this concept in the next couple of years. So the ones, why can I not click anymore? Oh, there we go. Okay, so the key EU policies that we identified for the next couple of years to integrate this concept. So on the left-hand side are policies that are probably most well known by the water community, and on the left side, and on the right side are ones that are possibly less engaged with. So the short-term opportunities include integrating into the river basin management plans, the 4th cycle. These are to integrate these into the program of measures to address flood droughts and biodiversity. For the floods directive, I think we still see in the flood risk management plans, there's still quite a focus on hard infrastructure investments. So the opportunity there is for the update of that, presenting the evidence to try and get part of the funding for prioritizing sponge measures, either instead of or with existing infrastructure. As regards biodiversity, then, the ongoing implementation of the Birds and Habitats directives is an important lever, but we have a very new opportunity. By September this year, member states have to produce their nature restoration plans to implement their national restoration plans to implement the nature restoration regulation. So drafts are expected to be submitted to the Commission by September. So for those interested in checking, are there sponge measures already being considered there? There should be in terms of peatland and wetland restoration targets, but also for restoring free-flowing rivers and the connection with the floodplain, this lateral connectivity. So this gives an opportunity to promote sponge function within that instrument. Another angle that is important to look at is the carbon, the mitigation impact that restoration can deliver in like peatland habitats and also forests. And with this regard, there is a requirement to update on an ongoing basis the National Energy and Climate Plans for the Land Use Change and Forestry Regulation, LULUCF. So in terms of thinking about how to argue for multifunctionality, sponge measures like peatland restoration can contribute both for carbon targets, but also for water and for biodiversity. So often perhaps the ministries in charge of thinking about this, how to meet these regulations, are not thinking about the co-benefits, and this is an opportunity to promote sponge measures with this in mind. The EU Water Resilience Strategy was adopted in 2025, and it includes the development of a sponge facility. So this is something that we're hoping to try and influence as well through these kind of publications. Then for on the right hand side, there's a major opportunity by the end of next year, because each member state has to draft their national and regional partnership plans. So this is how they're going to spend all the EU money in the multi-annual financial framework. And there's a chapter in that for agriculture on the CAP. And this engaging, I really hope that there will be some engagement with this concept of restoring landscape sponge retention to help build both farming resilience but also wider societal resilience. So there is there's quite a degree of flexibility in what member states will use this money for, but for sure the framework can be used to support measures taken on agricultural land to restore soil health, to restore soil organic carbon, to and also to store more water in the landscape. I'll just quickly go over the last three, because these are actually on the next slide I have. So that's the new Drinking Water Directive, the Soil Health Monitoring Framework, the EU Civil Protection Mechanism, and the Integrated Framework on Climate Resilience. This is something that's actually not yet adopted, but is expected to be announced by the Commission towards the end of this year. So the way the SpongeBoost, the way the brief is structured, it looks like this. There's a table that identifies all the policies, and then it identifies what the objective of that policy is. And then it identifies some key sponge provisions. I mean, nobody writing these policies ever wrote anything about a sponge provision. This is what we're terming them as, and it identifies the hooks that exist within these policies where people could promote sponge measures. So, for example, these are some of the kind of less obvious EU policies linked to sponge. So the EU Civil Protection Mechanism, this is like to prevent against disasters. And there is an article there, Article 4.2, which is about strengthening and anticipating disaster risks and threats, and then developing capacity to prevent these. So, one of the recommendations that we have there is to, engage now with those working on this mechanism to say, okay, is there capacity for developing, sponge capacity as a main adaptation action within this, and can we get money for training, for implementation? Similarly, I think sponge measures, we most think about the quantitative aspects, but also the impact for quality is very relevant. And in this regard, the recast of the Drinking Water Directive in 2020 offers an opportunity. So the updated Drinking Water Directive puts more of a focus on catchment risk assessment. So if, for example, a degraded peatland is causing significant organic matter in drinking water. This has to be combined with, this has to be addressed before it can be put into public supply. And this can actually cause problems in itself with trihalomethanes when they combine with the chlorine. So a way to actually mitigate the and reduce drinking water treatment costs and the carbon that comes from that can come from restoring the peatland instead. So but yeah, we need kind of stories, and we need evidence, and we need people to be able to join the dots to bring these together to say to policymakers, okay, you know, for these are in your drinking water catchments, if we restore the sponge function by doing this, this will actually also deliver your water quality benefits. And one other one I wanted to highlight, so the soil health monitoring law was adopted in 2025, and this provides a new law to assess soil health. And it also includes, it can include indicators on soil water retention. So there's an obligation to monitor for soil health, develop good soil descriptors for soil condition, and support managers in improving soil function. So I think it's important. I think a lot of many projects are focusing like perhaps on peatlands or forests or river restoration, but to really enhance soil function, to really enhance the sponge function across Europe, it will also have to be, you know, a large uptake of measures on improving soil health. And again, there's win-wins to be found between thinking about soil health, agricultural productivity, and building this resilience to water stress. So then the key, so the sponge brief sets out some analysis of the main policy opportunities that there are to engage with in the short term, and then it also has some conclusions and policy recommendations. So the first one being that we see sponge restoration as like a low regret but a catchment scale solution that should be promoted within river basin and flood risk management plans, but not only there. We think there's quite a lot of opportunity for these measures to be integrated into the catchment risk assessment process for drinking water directive. There is, we are proposing that the sponge facility that was proposed within the European Water Resilience Strategy, that this is considered as it's not just an initiative for water. This is like a cross-directorate within the Commission, but it's also a cross-societal opportunity for delivering a range of ecosystem services. And then I think if we have this concept of sponges as being this this vision around which a number of instruments can align, then we have to think about how to align our policy instruments to deliver this, and with specific regard to the CAP, the cohesion policy, LULUCF, and nature restoration. And towards the future, moving towards measurable sponge function indicators, building on what we already have, would be essential for better reporting on the underlying soil, the underlying health and resilience of ecosystems. So the QR code allows you to access the policy brief, which was just uploaded, I think, yesterday to our website. So you can find it there. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, for walking us through the policy landscape for making sponges happening on the ground. Yeah, the policy brief was published just in time, I should add, jointly with the contributions of our sister projects. It's a joint policy brief with also SpongeScapes and SpongeWorks. So looking across these presentations, I think we've seen three complementary pieces of the puzzle, generating and bringing together the evidence. Second, communicating that evidence in a way people can engage with. And third, translating it into policies. I think one thing that comes through is, yeah, certainly we aren't starting from scratch. We have this growing evidence, practical experiences, and increasing number of successful examples. And the challenge now is connecting these pieces through better communication, stronger partnerships, and policies that enable implementation at a bigger scale, at the landscape scale. So I hope today's webinar has given you a flavor of what SpongeBoost is contributing to in that journey. The database, policy brief, and comic series are all available, links in the chat on the website. So we encourage you to make use of them, share them with colleagues, and continue the conversation. If you haven't done so already, please sign up for our newsletter or other social media channels to be informed of upcoming outputs, such as Karina mentioned, the next comic, the call for nominations for our Sponge Booster of the Year, and as I just mentioned, our next webinar in the fall, which will dive into the results of our work and demonstration sites. So on behalf of the entire SpongeBoost Consortium, thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great summer, and we look forward to staying in touch and working together to help turn evidence into action for sponge landscapes across Europe. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.